with this panel, we really want to, talk about the sell side and the supplier, how the suppliers are pushing the envelope in terms of programmatic out of home and what that means. And I think it's important because, the sell side, I think, has really been driving a lot of the energy, across the landscape with regards to programmatic. So, in kind of preparation for this panel, I think one thing that jumped out at me is most of you all come from, the digital background and not a traditional out-of-home background. So, I'll throw it out. Maybe, Wade, if you want to start, should sales organizations or supply organizations start thinking about, what their staff looks like and what their talent base looks like?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's a chief consideration for any media owner who's moving into the programmatic space. I mean, there's a lot to figure out before you move into programmatic. One of the first things is, what are my customers looking for? What solutions do they need me to build? What inventory is most valuable for them? And what technology partners do they want to see me make my inventory available through? So once you figure that out, right, you've got your product approach, and then the next natural step there is your go-to-market. And that's really where the consideration around how sales teams interoperate comes into play. And that's one of the things that we've had to spend quite a bit of time doing, is ensuring that our very traditional and core side of the business is not disrupted, and much the opposite. Right? We're figuring out a way for us to add more value to customers, and for us to, of course, realize the opportunity and the revenue growth on our end, and that requires a very tight-knit collaborative approach internally across the direct and programmatic sales team if they're separate, or just working cohesively if your sales team is already offering that up in a hybrid fashion today.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. So Neil, Captivate's offering is predominantly, short form, premium curated video content, right? Mm-hmm. So you coming into this space now, coming from the digital side, how are you starting to figure out the trend? How do you adjust the Captivate approach to the out-of-home marketplace where a lot of your business has been coming from historically, and now trying to educate and earn more dollars coming from perhaps different budgets?
Yeah, I think to kind of follow on with what Wade said, I think another benefit of having digital expertise in-house at your company is it's somebody who knows kind of how the sausage gets made in the digital world. So when you're vetting SSP partners or data and measurement partners, you kind of can see the difference between the sales pitch and the reality. But to your point, the way that we're thinking about programmatic at Captivate is more about growing the pie than necessarily taking out-of-home dollars and pushing that through programmatic pipes. Because programmatic means we can now be in the consideration set for a campaign that might not have a dedicated out-of-home budget, or someone who only transacts programmatically. It means that our 15-second digital video is now a complement to a client's digital video plan in general.
So Gina, let's talk about from a small, medium-sized, independent operator standpoint. How do you find how is Yesco fitting into the programmatic out-of-home space?
Well, we are a very traditional out-of-home company, unlike the rest who are very digital focused. About 20% of our inventory is digital at this point, so it's an extremely important part of our revenue stream. But we're in really low DMA markets, and so the opportunity for national buys on our inventory is very low. So we are looking for ways to automate and come into the programmatic space to sell to local buyers that have really small budgets, not necessarily focus on big national buys. And it's very important for us to really focus on the traditional media buy and making sure that doesn't go away, because that's what the majority of our clients are still looking at. But we want to maximize on opportunities for small digital buys as well.
Right. So if we're all in agreement that we're defining programmatic out-of-home as data-driven, automated, and biddable, right? So obviously, data is a big part of that. So John, at Mira, right now, I would say you have a pretty unique data opportunity and a different outlook on the landscape. So, and really more around kind of real-time data and being able to serve in real time. So you want to talk a little bit about what Mira is doing from a data perspective and how that's impacting your business?
Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't know, certainly our reputation precedes us a lot less than everybody else on this stage. But so Mira's real-time location intelligence. So real-time data feeds applied to out-of-home. We can also leverage that for planning and measurement as well. And so we're sitting at this place where we feel that there's a lot of value in automating inventory, aggregating inventory across various channels to make that available for buyers. I think that's something where we haven't really crossed yet, and a few brands and few agencies are starting to work with us on this, is to leverage a real-time audience. Like so if you to a brand or an advertiser, the thing that makes a piece of inventory more or less valuable in our minds, our argument is who's looking at that screen right now. Weather is great to optimize for, but it's fairly binary. You don't really need to pay a real-time premium for that. Audience planning using historical data, same type of thing. You can plan around that. You don't need to pay a real-time premium. So if you can understand who's looking at a screen in real time, we feel that audience piece, and it's a bit of a different way, it's a different sausage than on digital. But so, we're looking at how crowds of people index, because certainly in like a post-Cambridge Analytica world, we're not going to call somebody by name on a billboard, but there's a crowd analytics approach to this real-time location intelligence thing, and that's the thing that's where we're sitting at, and we think that's what makes that can make out-of-home data-driven, or certainly plays a piece of it, but certainly plays a role in what makes out-of-home biddable.
So we're talking a lot about sausage making. So let's talk about who's eating the sausage. So you talked about a couple of clients here and there. Wade, I think Clear Channel's probably been one of the earliest pioneers in the space. Let's talk about where have you seen some wins?
Sure. So we've been in market over a year and a half now with our private marketplace solution, even longer than that, experimenting and tinkering on the open exchange. And I mean, I'm definitely very happy to say that we've seen interest and activity flow through from multiple different sides of the ecosystem. So we're of course seeing a very large share of programmatic and digital buyers and budgets really compose some of that activity, which is some of what I think we're all hoping to be able to achieve, infusing new dollars into the out-of-home space. We're seeing some out-of-home buyers take advantage of the opportunity across the open exchange and private marketplace. We're seeing hybrid flavors of that, which is encouraging. I know the Horizon and HX folks were talking about teams coming together, both in terms of the organization of them and the collaboration of them to activate. We're also seeing advertisers who have an in-house trading capability and leverage their own demand-side platform start to tap into out-of-home programmatically. So that's all been great, but one of the biggest upsides is that we're not only seeing our programmatic solution drive programmatic dollars and activity, we're also seeing it lead to direct sale opportunities. So we're seeing clients who might not have been exposed to out-of-home as much or have bought it as much in the past buy programmatically and then realize there are also direct guaranteed use cases to come from that, and that's really the kind of nirvana state for us from a sales standpoint.
And Neil, what do you think? I think obviously Captivate, different than kind of Clear Channel's core offering, is probably most similar to a digital property or video property. So are you seeing a similar kind of uptick with your business and clients or new clients or direct clients, or more uptick from the digital side, or how's that breaking out for you?
Kind of all of the above. The way that we think about it is we have been fast followers of Clear Channel. Thank you, Wade, for laying the groundwork to make it easier for us.
Do what we can.
Thank you. What we're finding is that it's a combination of certain DSPs that are really leaning into digital out-of-home, like MediaMath, Adelphic, Adobe, DataZoo. The Trade Desk is now starting to kind of dip their toe in. DBM, which is Google's DSP, has, I don't know about you, Wade, but they've told us they're not interested until 2019, at which case they'll come in and probably swoop up the entire marketplace. But it is a combination of new money from digital sources, like what I was saying before, where it's people who don't necessarily have out-of-home budgets. It's people who might have a mandate from their agency that says, well, if I can buy it programmatically, I'm mandated to buy it programmatically. But I also think, again, to Wade's point, that it's not an either, or it's kind of like an and/or. So we do have clients who are buying us programmatically, but when they want to do the big full-screen takeovers or the custom integrations, that's coming through the direct team. And I think we're looking at it, again, as growing the pie and not just shifting buckets of money around.
Yeah, and I think you make some good points, and obviously a lot of nervous laughter in the room when you mentioned, DBM coming in possibly in 2019 and swooping up the marketplace. I think it's, to play devil's advocate here, and from an agency perspective, and obviously Google being one of our clients and conversations we have with them, is this path that we're going down? Is there any concern from a supply side that it is contrary to kind of what has always been out-of-home's historical selling point, or its biggest benefits, which is the power of the location? So the more we kind of go down this path of data-driven out-of-home or automation or a biddable marketplace in an open exchange world, we get, it becomes more about pricing, and it gets more about buying audience, and gets away from, that core attribute of location. So, Gina, maybe for you, obviously being a very traditional out-of-home company, is that a concern for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, when we started thinking a couple of years ago about, how do we look at this programmatic, this scary programmatic world that was being shoved down our throats, we needed to make sure that, again, we protected the traditional buy. We needed to make sure that we did not just run CPMs into the ground. We needed to make sure we were not in a situation where we were being required to guarantee inventory into a marketplace that we did not know what the ROI was going to be. We needed, as a very traditional marketer, the world that these guys live in a digital world, to us was like speaking a foreign language. So we had to sort of tiptoe our way into it and dip our toes in the water. And we've really found that just by only making our remnant inventory available to a private marketplace and really helping to promote it to the clients that have really small advertising budgets has been a winner for us.
Yeah. So, I think, it's important to note, and I think we're all familiar with this, is obviously the opportunity is distinctly different from, programmatic and digital space being a one-to-one opportunity, and now with out-of-home fundamentally being a one-to-many media format. I think of it as, really trying to find a balance of historically not having enough data, but now having too much data. And if we start to really hyper-analyze and, put everything under a microscope, does that data all of a sudden start turning the tables on out-of-home from its other big value proposition, which is cost efficiency compared to other media channels? So if we really start to slice and dice audiences and start to buy based off audiences, and that data takes us down that path, are we concerned that we're now losing one of the other value propositions in terms of cost efficiency? So, John, maybe you can talk a little bit how using data in a one-to-many marketplace, we can avoid that.
Yeah, I think you talk to the networks we work with. A few of them in this room, like AdSpace, for example, and Westfield. All that ends up happening with that inventory is that it's worth more. Because it's a targeted approach to that inventory. So you can essentially create a single, think of it as like a single spot in a loop that is now optimized to be served in real time. Just like you would serve something different for different type of weather, you can now serve something different based on how a crowd of people indexes, whether it's like a premium electronics intender versus a value electronics intender, or homeowners and renters, or whatever the different approach is for that single spot, making that spot available for to be measured, to respond to a real-time measurement of a crowd of people. I don't see how that drives CPMs down in the future. Although the common argument about a race to the bottom, I think, was covered in the first panel. The key is, I believe it was Stephanie who made the point. The key is you price your inventory at what it's worth or more, and that's how a race to the bottom is avoided. And I feel like that's generally that is the path that will occur in out of home. Yeah,
and I don't think it's. I'm not really. I'm as concerned I am about a race to the bottom. I'm also concerned about an unfair inflation of media formats, and the way they were priced historically. So.
That's because you're on the buying side.
Well, I would say then
we love that.
I would say the proof's in the pudding then. So if it's driving higher engagement, so let's say, for example, reaching a targeted spot increases the cost of that slot by 10%, which is actually pretty in line with what we end up charging, or what it ends up adding to the buy. We did one buy where we were driving web conversions to one of the meal kit delivery companies, and increase web conversions and likelihood to buy by 63%. So if you that's a pretty simple math problem to do. Like I spent 10% more and drove 63% more conversion. That ROI, that dog hunts.
Right. No doubt.
So to get away from the sausage theme, I'm sorry if we
Move on to dogs.
I guess they're kind of.
So
go ahead, please.
one other thing I'd like to add to that is because Captivate's digital video on digital screens, and we're starting to bring in new targeting that lets us, for example, integrate like a client's first-party CRM data and things like that, we're always walking a fine line between trying to be digital, but also be true to like the fact that we are out of home. It is a one-to-many medium. It's not one-to-one. There is no CTR. There is no like one-to-one attribution. But at the same time, the trade-off, if I'm a digital or programmatic buyer, is I'm trading that stuff for premium, brand safe, fraud-free, 100% viewable inventory with 100% accurate location data. And we have some programmatic buyers that I talk to say, I can't buy that unless you can measure it through Moat. And then I have other people who are like super, super into it.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we obviously bring up some other good points there about obviously around brand safety and curated content, and I think for us we look at that as being a really big upside to this, and being able to go to our clients and saying there are currently 150,000 displays in the out-of-home space that are brand safe, custom curated, and you can do some really cool things alongside of what you're doing in the programmatic digital space. So. How do you see that? Wade, talk a little bit how you see that piece evolving, in the marketplace.
Well, when we talk about full viewability, 100% viewability, no fraud, brand safe context, we're finding there's resonance there when we're talking to anyone that's tapped into any kind of digital buying. And actually, when you think about our inventory as an industry in the context of those things, it kind of decries the notion of there being a race to the bottom, just because we're talking about good inventory that checks all those boxes. And Ryan, I'm sure you can attest to this, but we've seen buyers want to pay a commensurate amount with that quality. And then that goes hand in hand with the controls that we were talking about earlier, where sellers set the minimum price that they want to sell something for programmatically, buyers set the maximum, and if the price point lands in the middle of those two, then a transaction happens. If not, it doesn't. And that's in line with the transactional mechanics and the expectations of the programmatic buyers that we talk to. And when you marry all those things together, it's definitely looking like a fruitful opportunity, and we're getting a lot of good feedback from the market on what that inventory represents.
And if I could just comment on the whole race to the bottom idea, I feel it's the wrong analogy for out of home. Like if you think about mobile inventory, which was the world that I came from, and digital display inventory, that inventory is essentially limitless. For all intents and purposes, it is infinite, right? If Captivate wants more inventory, we have to go out and put screens in a building. If Wade wants more inventory, he's got to get the zoning board to approve a new billboard, and then they got to go build it, right? So the fact that there's scarcity around our inventory means that it's not a race to the bottom because it's actual scarce inventory.
Yeah, and I think one other thing I want to touch on, which is kind of the process, right? In terms of I think right now we're looking at, and I think a lot of people think they automatically default to kind of programmatic and digital space, which really revolves around open exchange and private marketplace. But I think right now what we're seeing is certainly kind of the private marketplace process to kind of be the bridge between kind of where we're doing and kind of having that hand holding in between kind of helping that home space kind of emerge into the programmatic marketplace. So Gina, maybe talk a little bit about where you're seeing the value, and is it more of a private marketplace approach for you guys, or you're trying to run towards an open exchange approach?
No, right now we're just focusing on the private marketplace. We've partnered with an independent platform that has made it very easy for us to provide our inventory into the marketplace and let the marketplace determine the value of that inventory. And it's being done completely on a remnant space scenario. I think in the earlier panel they actually defined remnant space. They wanted to differentiate remnant space from vacant space, unsold space I think they called it. But for us, the cost to put up a digital billboard is extremely high, and so all of our locations that have digitals on them are premium locations. So to us, it's all just unsold space. So whatever is just not sold in our traditional channels, we just immediately move over into the marketplace.
And Wade, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the benefits, first, obviously for you guys, but then obviously from a client and an agency, holding company perspective around the private marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, so when we talk about value for buy and sell side, on the buy side, efficiency gets talked about a lot, and that, to address that up front, that's one of the tenets of programmatic's value, but it's not just media value, it's also operational efficiency value that you're getting. The flexibility of programmatic solutions for anything that's biddable or non-guaranteed, being able to start and stop the campaign at your discretion, the ability to target day parts or days of weeks, we're seeing that really resonate. We're getting a lot of traction there. Unique targeting, that's obviously the ability to bring data to the table that some of the DSPs and trading desks are offering. But one of the biggest things is the concept of optimization. So we're really seeing buyers glom onto the fact that for the first time really ever, they can start to shift spend around between media owners, between day parts, between geos, between audiences, understanding what works through the attribution that they're employing. So that kind of rounds out the value on the buy side. For the sell side, I mean, it's a little simpler in that for the last panel, folks were talking about yield optimization quite a bit, right? It's being able to now have different buyers that are able to tap into your otherwise unsold inventory at the last moment in time and offer up a biddable price, where as a seller, you now are able to better understand how valuable is this piece of inventory to the marketplace, right? And as you have multiple supply-side platforms and buyers there programmatically, you can line that up against your direct inventory and really figure out how best to bring your inventory to market and monetize it.
I think as an independent operator, what's really important to make sure is to make sure, regardless of what platform we use, that there's enough advertisers being aggregated to make it worth our while, and to make sure that we're not giving up inventory and not receiving the return from the platform itself. So it's important to make sure whatever platform you're on has enough advertisers being brought to the table.
Yeah, and it's a good point about inventory, because obviously majority of the inventory in the United States is still static, which a lot of people don't think that could be executed in a programmatic fashion. Down the road, we start thinking about this a year from now, 2 years from now. What do you think the landscape looks like, and how does static inventory play a part in that?
I mean, I think the nearest term use case for that is not a biddable one, but it's a programmatic guaranteed execution. So using software to automate some of the steps that today are a little bit more manual in booking an upfront reservation-based buy. So clearly, there's enough supply there, to your point, that could justify it. I think what's also exciting about that is the ability to use more data within some of those platforms for planning, for targeting, and of course for attribution. That's something that we on the Clear Channel side have been doing now for over 2 years with our Radar solution. We're firm believers in the value that data can unlock from all of our inventory, printed and digital, whether you work with us programmatically or directdirectly. And I think there's still a massive opportunity across the industry for more of that for printed inventory in particular.
I think as a small vendor, that's going to be really important for us. It'll lower our costs. I might have all my account executives form a lynch mob and come after me, but it does lower our expenses if we can figure out a way to put all of our static inventory on an automatic buying platform.
And so, John, how do you see how do you see the data world evolving over the next year or two?
Well, I think to keep with the to wrap up.
Oh, how much time? Oh, do we have some time for questions? Do we go questions now? Yeah. All right, never mind. You don't get to say that. All right.
Don't worry, it's not that
Would you like
important.
to ask
Data's not important. Don't worry about it.
Somebody
let's get some
Someone
questions
asked
from the
about
audience.
data.
Anybody have any questions? Michael has a question.
What do the financials look like as a media owner now in a programmatic transaction? We have media, data, measurement, whatever other tax that needs to be paid. What do your financials look like as a media?
Great. I mean, that's definitely something that's a big consideration, right? As you are now inserted into the programmatic value chain. I mean, you have to make sure that you're now taking other fees that folks are imposing on buyers, and they're factoring into their CPMs or their fixed rates, as well as any rev share rates or the cost of the data that you may or may not be passing through to customers. So, I mean, I'm sure it's a little bit different for everybody up here on this panel, but there's a lot of scrutiny that you have to apply and a lot of digging that you have to do with the partnerships that you strike to make sure that you've factored in all of the steps and all of the incremental costs that can happen for everything that you just mentioned to settle in.
I would also add to that part of our programmatic sales pitch is the fact that there is no tech tax, because on the DSP side, you're not paying a viewability vendor. You're not using some third-party data set that the DSP is charging you for, right? The targeting is happening on our side, so that price is kind of already built into the CPM that they're paying for the media. So the fact that there's not all these middlemen taking a little piece of each step of the transaction, Michael, means that, yeah, the financials look good.
Any other questions? We have a few more minutes. No?
Can Jonathan finish his,
Yeah, please.
his point on data?
What was it? Question was just how.
Just how do you see your business and your focus on data evolving over the next year or two?
All right, so one of the things that was just mentioned is the tax of middlemen that get pulled out of there. So now, not advocating too much for middlemen, but one of the things that middlemen do provide is the same sausage across all dogs. So it's the same unit.
That was
of
a
data.
great mixture of the metaphor.
That's why.
Well
That's really
done.
why
You've been playing that all day,
answer.
man. That was
That's
great.
why I was itching to answer that question.
great.
But even if you think seriously for a moment, it's the same unit of measure across all these different vendors. So that provides a lot of value to different brands or agencies. And so what I see, what I hope evolves, I think I read this in a magazine called Theory's Convenient for Me, was that these would there will be a one or two or three large third-party data providers that provide the same unit of measure across all different vendors that can be targeted against and can be measured, planned against, and then measure attribution against. So that's how what I see happening in the very near term is that this just starts becoming more integral to the buys.
Yeah, and you guys are ready to? I'll ask. We have a couple minutes. I'll ask another question. You guys mentioned the DSPs not providing your typical third-party data that you might be paying for in the digital space. So is this more like a bring your own data to the party thing? Like, is it all kind of proprietary based on the whoever operators is listing inventory on the supply side? So what data is being used through the process right now? If not, if the DSP is not bringing any data to the game.
Well, it depends on the DSP, but I think we're largely mirroring the digital world where a publisher, in our case, a media owner, brings some of their own data to the table. And that could be geopath data, that could be your own proprietary partnerships, like what we've got with Radar. It could be your proximity targeting or geo-targeting or what have you. But we are seeing some DSPs that have taken hold of the opportunity and offered that up. So you've got two different paths, right? Vistar as a DSP partner is definitely leading the pack there from an audience targeting perspective with some other capabilities they're offering because they've been in market the longest and they've got a sophisticated solution there. But other DSPs are starting to also step their game up based on what we're seeing. And really it comes down to the buy side's optionality, right? Mm-hmm. Whose data do you want to use, or do you want to even bring some of your own first-party data to the table, or what combination of those things is valuable to you guys?
So we just launched a partnership that lets us look at what audiences are present in Captivate buildings based on location data, browsing data, and then I think this is where it gets really interesting for the programmatic and digital world. Being able to ingest audience segments from a DMP that like Intercontinental Hotels is using for their digital campaigns. Being able to match that against the audience that's present in our building, and then basically spitting out a building list that says, here are all the Captivate buildings that have the highest concentration of the people in your digital audience segments. To me, I'm sort of a nerd like this. I think that's really exciting, and that's that mixture of bringing our own data, because the targeting does happen on our side when we build that building list that goes into the PMP, but it's really kind of a melding of the two worlds of being able to use essentially digital and programmatic data and then matching that against the audiences that are in our buildings.
Cool. We have, looks like we have about 4 minutes left here. Anybody with any other questions now? You guys got a heavy dose of this topic over the last 2 hours. So
We're also in between you and the ice cream social.
yeah, we'll get you out. We'll maybe get you out a little bit early, but
Absolutely.
So again, I was just going to say, just quickly, like kind of lightning round type situation. We're sitting here next year, at the OAAA. Where do we think this is going? Just talk about your business. Give me like a kind of a quick catchphrase on where you think you're sitting 1 year from now. Just can go down the line.
Oh, okay.
Yep, sorry.
I think 1 year from now, the trade desk will be active in buying digital out of home.
I mean, we're working with a few of the major holdcos right now, but I anticipate at this time next year we'll be working with all the major holdcos, a number of smaller agencies, like just more proliferation across the industry, and a few of the holdout DSPs that are not yet on board, I think are going to see the value because of the buy side and will also be active and buying.
I think for us, just continuing to look for opportunities to tap into the small direct buy market in a way that we've never been able to before.
I think for us, dynamic creative optimization campaigns will be generated more for us from digital agencies like Digitas or Molten Low type folks.